Senator Daines, and I want to thank all of my colleagues on the floor today, all of the freshman class. You know, we got a great, Mr. President, you're part of it. We got a great class, 12 new freshmen here, and we're very serious about this topic, as you can see, because this is a critical topic, not only to the Senate, this is a critical topic to the country. And yet, you know, our friends in the media, they often sit above the presiding officer's chairs. You wouldn't know that the Senate Minority Leader has filibustered spending for our troops 6 times. 6 times in the last year. No one reports on it. It's a disgrace, in my view. And you know, last week we had our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. They were talking a lot about the Senate doing its job. The Senate doing its job. Well, I think if you polled the American people and you asked them what the #1 job the Senate or the Congress or the federal government should be doing, it would be defending this nation. It would be supporting the troops. That's the #1 thing in terms of the Senate doing its job that we should be focused on. Now, as Senator Capito so eloquently talked about, you look at where our forces are right now all over the world. 5,000 troops in Iraq. 5,000. By the way, they're in combat. The White House doesn't like to use the word combat, but those troops are in combat. And our troops in Syria, brave pilots, bombing ISIS, terrorist groups on a daily basis. They're in combat. Their families know it. We have a White House, again, that doesn't want to talk about combat. The press secretary won't mention the word, but our forces are in combat. We had 2 aircraft carrier battle groups recently in the South China Sea. 2. Incredibly important demonstration of American resolve. We have over 1,000 troops that were just put in Europe by the president to reassure our European allies with regard to Russian aggression. A new headquarters stood up in Poland, American headquarters. The president ordered 8,500 troops to remain in Afghanistan. These are all initiatives by the president, by our leaders in the Department of Defense, just in the last couple months. And many of us support these. Many of us support these. And Mr. President, as you know, it's not just the real-world contingency operations, the combat that our troops are in. It's real-world training. And my colleague from Montana mentioned JBER in Alaska. We have some training exercises, Red Flag Alaska, one of the best air-to-air combat training exercises anywhere in the world. We had many evolutions of Red Flag Alaska this summer. Our troops training hard. So this is what the U.S. military is doing throughout the world, throughout the country, to keep our nation safe. So what is the Senate doing? More specifically, what is the Minority Leader doing? Well, as we've talked about, we came back last week, back in session, and the first vote we took was the 6th time that the Minority Leader of the United States Senate organized a filibuster to make sure our troops did get funding. 6 times. There's no other bill in the Senate in the last year and a half that the Minority Leader of the United States Senate has picked the filibuster more than this bill. The bill that funds our troops. Senator Capito asked a very good question. Why? 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 Mr. President, I've been down on the floor asking this question for months. We're freshmen. We're new to this body, but we have not heard one member of the other party come down on the floor and explain why they're filibustering the spending of our troops. Not once. Mr. President, this is what our troops need. They watch this, by the way. They understand what's happening. A lot of people think, oh, it's the Senate. Nobody understands these procedural filibusters and things. The men and women in the United States military know exactly what's happening. We will come down here and continue to fight for the funding and support of our troops and their families as long as the other side continues this filibuster. And Senator Capito, as I mentioned, asked a really important question. Why? But here's another question for my colleagues. I serve on the Armed Services Committee. I serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I know these are great bipartisan committees. Members of both bodies. Very patriotic, very supportive of the military. But why are my colleagues on the other side of the aisle following the Senate Minority Leader? Why are they following his lead in the filibuster? I really, really wish one of them, just one, would come down and explain to the American people why six times in the last year and a half, the Minority Leader has filibustered spending for our troops, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have followed him. Because if you polled this question back in any state where you're from, regardless of party, Democrat or Republican, the American people would say, fund the troops. The American people would say, bring to the floor and at least have a debate the bill that passed the Appropriations Committee unanimously. The American people would say, they're doing their job. U.S. Senate, time to do your job. Fund the troops, support the troops. It's remarkable that we're still debating this, Mr. President, and we're going to keep raising this, and maybe the media will focus on it. But I, again, want to commend my colleague, Senator Daines, for leading this colloquy, which is so important for the people of the United States to understand what's really happening on the floor of this important body. Senator Daines.